Nurse Julia's colleagues teased her, and to many, it seemed like an unbelievable situation. The unidentified and memoryless guy was about to become the father of her child. There were no clues about his past, but everything was about to change when a convoy of cars stopped in front of their house, shedding light on long-hidden truths. That morning, Julia's alarm didn't go off at the usual time, causing her to wake up unexpectedly late. She had moved into her new house just 48 hours before, and most of her clothes and personal belongings were still packed away, waiting to be unpacked and organized. As a nurse working grueling 12-hour shifts, Julia had barely had time to settle into her new home. The house she now called hers was a significant achievement. Although it was an old building requiring considerable renovation, Julia was confident that, with time and dedication, she would turn the space into her dream home. Situated in a neighborhood farther away from the city center, where the hospital was located, the house offered a more secluded and tranquil environment, a welcome contrast to the hustle and bustle of urban life. That morning, Julia knew she had to hurry to avoid any delays that could cause her trouble. Amidst the clutter of boxes, she managed to find a clean uniform and quickly put it on. With a hurried coffee in hand, she headed towards the hospital. Normally, she would park her car near the hospital, but luck didn't seem to be on her side that day. The only available parking spot was a few blocks away. Rushing to avoid being late, she decided to take a shortcut through an alley. It was at that moment that something surprising caught her attention. Among the dumpsters, Julia spotted a person lying down. Her nursing instincts kicked in immediately, and she ran to check on the person's condition. With relief, she found that the person was still alive and breathing. Without wasting time, she called for rescue services. The hospital was just a few meters away, so within minutes, an ambulance arrived and parked at the scene. Julia accompanied the young man in the ambulance. A deep cut on his head was visible, a serious wound that required immediate care. Subsequent exams revealed he had broken ribs, bruises, and deep cuts on his face. Additionally, a spleen rupture required urgent surgery, and a mild traumatic brain injury was diagnosed. With each new discovery, Julia's concern grew as she anxiously awaited the unfolding medical procedures. Since she was the one who found the young man, Julia was deeply involved in his treatment and wanted updates on his condition. It became clear that the boy had been a victim of a fight, prompting the involvement of the police. However, due to his unconscious state and lack of identification documents, the police had limited options. They collected Julia's detailed statement and left, hoping someone would report a missing person matching his description. Days passed, and Gabriel, as the nurses began to call him, remained unconscious. Julia constantly sought updates from the doctors and insisted on being the nurse responsible for his care. She felt a deep connection to him, as if she were somehow responsible for his well-being. Some of her co-workers teased Julia, joking that she had fallen in love with a stranger. These taunts didn't bother her, though. She felt profound compassion for the boy who had no one to claim him, no true name, and no known story. 2 weeks after Gabriel was admitted, something remarkable happened. One day, while Julia was checking his medication by his bedside, she felt a touch on her hand. It was Gabriel. His eyes could barely open, but he managed to mumble a few words, asking for water. "Don't strain yourself. I'll call the doctor and tell them you've awakened," Julia said with profound relief in her heart. After a series of tests, the doctors found that Gabriel was clinically well. However, they decided to keep him hospitalized for a few more days to monitor his progress. If everything went as planned, he would soon be discharged. However, There was one complicated detail. Gabriel couldn't remember anything, not even his true name. The impact on his head had deeply affected his memory. The mystery surrounding his identity added another layer of complexity to the situation. The doctors informed Gabriel about the circumstances in which he was found. He expressed a desire to speak to the nurse who had discovered him. Moved and willing to help, Julia shared all the details of how she had found him. To both their frustration, her account did not uncover any significant clues about his past. Gabriel's distress and frustration over his memory loss were evident. Julia quickly became a friend and confidant to him. Even during mealtimes, she stayed by his side. With no friends or family visiting, the hospital staff became his only source of support and companionship. Julia stood out as someone he could trust and share his concerns with. Gabriel's clinical condition had improved significantly, and there was no longer a need for hospitalization. It was time to say goodbye to the friends he had made in the hospital and face life outside its corridors. Gabriel was at a crossroads, with no home to return to, at least none that he could remember. It was then that Julia came up with a solution. Carefully, she said to Gabriel, "I have a room at the back of my property. It's not very big, but it has a bathroom, and it can be a place for you to stay while you start over." It was a risky proposition. After all, Julia didn't know who Gabriel might be or what his story was, but she chose to follow her instincts. Offering a friendly hand and a safe place for him to begin anew, Julia extended her trust. Gratefully, Gabriel accepted Julia's kind invitation. The room at the back of her property, which had previously served as a storage space, was filled with gardening tools and equipment. That day, the two joined forces and worked hard to clean up the space and make it at least minimally habitable for Gabriel. After hours of effort, they decided to celebrate with a shared pizza, and Gabriel expressed his sincere gratitude for Julia's kindness. The next morning, Julia had already gone to work when Gabriel woke up. He noticed that she had left a basket of fruit, bread, and a bottle of coffee at the door of his room. This warm gesture of care and generosity deeply touched Gabriel's heart. Determined to start his life anew, Gabriel set off for a meeting with a social worker who would help him overcome the challenges of rebuilding his identity, securing a new job, and obtaining necessary documents, as there were no clear clues about who he was. That same day, Gabriel returned to Julia's house with exciting news. He had landed a job as a gardener at a park and would start the next day. It was the fresh start he had been longing for. While waiting for Julia to return from work, Gabriel noticed that the house needed some improvements. Using the tools left by the former residents, he began making small repairs. Windows were fixed, doors adjusted, and loose boards properly nailed down. Even the gate received attention. When Julia returned from work, she was surprised to find Gabriel on the roof of the house. "I'm fixing some tiles. Some of them were broken," he shouted from up there. "You didn't have to do all that, Gabriel. You're still recovering," Julia commented, concerned about his effort. The young man smiled and replied, "It's the least I can do for someone who reached out when I needed it most. And I have good news. Tomorrow, I start my new job. Soon, I'll be able to pay you for the room rent," he said excitedly. Julia nodded affectionately. "Don't worry about that, Gabriel. I'm happy to help. The important thing is that you're recovering well and starting over." As the days and weeks passed, the friendship between the two young people grew stronger. Every day, after returning from their respective jobs, they shared a meal. Gabriel continued making repairs around the house as a way of expressing his gratitude for Julia's hospitality. Gradually, they began to realize that their feelings were evolving into something deeper than friendship. Sharing daily joys and frustrations created intimate bonds between them. The complicity and mutual support they experienced deepened their relationship. What started as a friendship gradually transformed into a romantic relationship, a journey that unfolded lightly and naturally. It was a love that grew with each passing day, and being together was comforting and fulfilling. Months went by, and exciting news brought a new dimension to their relationship. Julia discovered she was pregnant. When Gabriel learned the news, he was overjoyed. His love for Julia was already deep, and the idea of starting a family with her filled him with enthusiasm and anticipation. When their co-workers found out that Julia was pregnant with Gabriel, the man without memory, they couldn't help but laugh. "We warned you, Julia, that you were in love with him even before he woke up. How are you going to start a family with someone who doesn't even know who he is?" They teased. Julia, although aware of the unique challenges they would face, was confident in her relationship with Gabriel. She knew that the love they shared was genuine and deep, and they were willing to face any obstacles together, including Gabriel's lack of memory. One morning, Gabriel woke up visibly worried, and Julia noticed something was bothering him. That's when he shared something that cast a shadow of uncertainty over their relationship. "Julia, I had a dream about a woman. She was holding a baby in her arms. I remember kissing her forehead and also the baby's. The woman was crying a lot and begging me not to leave, but I left anyway. I don't know if it was just a dream or maybe a memory," he said with a perplexed expression. Gabriel's concerns weighed heavily on his heart, and he shared with Julia, "What if I was married and abandoned my family? What if I was a bad person?" Julia looked at him with understanding and affection, holding his hand. "Gabriel, we can't jump to conclusions based on a dream or bits of uncertain memories. What matters is who you are now and how we deal with the circumstances we have. You've shown yourself to be a good and loving person since we met, and we're building a future together. We'll face any challenge that comes our way together." The next day, Gabriel returned to the police station, determined to find out more about his past. He wanted to know if there were any updates on the investigations into his case. The police explained that without new leads, the case was at a standstill, but suggested he look through missing persons files to see if anyone had reported someone missing who matched his description. Sitting in front of the computer at the station, Gabriel examined various photos of people registered as missing across the country. That's when his eyes fixed on an image that left him speechless. It was his own photo. His real name was Alex. With his heart racing, Gabriel dialed the phone number associated with his photo in the missing persons files. He wasn't sure what to say, but he was filled with hope and anxiety. "Hello, this is Gabriel. Alex. Are you my family? Are you looking for me?" were the words that came out of his mouth as he held the phone, eager for any response from the other end of the line. On the other end, there was the emotional sobbing of a woman. "Alex, you've finally come back to us. We've missed you so much. Where can we meet?" Gabriel, still stunned by the surprise, shared the address of the house where he was living with Julia. "You're living a bit far away. It'll take us a few hours to get there, but wait for us. Alex." Gabriel shared all the details of what had happened over the phone with Julia, and the two stood side by side, anxious, waiting for the person Alex had spoken to arrive. He hadn't even asked the woman's name who had spoken on the phone. Could she be his wife? It was getting dark when the couple heard the sound of cars stopping in front of the house. There were several cars. A woman got out of the first vehicle, the same one Alex remembered from his dream. An older couple got out of the second car. It was at that moment looking at that couple, that something seemed to click in Alex's memory. He ran towards these people, embracing them with a look of recognition and emotion. Julia watched everything with a bewildered expression. "Julia, I remember now," exclaimed Gabriel, or rather Alex. The truth was about to be revealed, and he was eager to share it. "I want you to meet my parents, and this here is my sister," he said, introducing the people who had arrived. Alex began to tell the story of his life. He had always been a free spirit, traveling the world, enjoying the freedom that his flexible job allowed. However, his father insisted that it was time to settle down somewhere, and just before embarking on another trip, they had a heated argument. Despite his sister's pleas, the same one who was holding the baby in his dream, Alex set off in search of yet another adventure. But while he was in that city, he was mugged and left in an alley. It was at that moment that Julia entered his life. The woman who appeared in his dream was indeed his sister, and the baby he was holding was his nephew. As Alex was constantly traveling and sometimes took a while to get in touch, the family took longer to report him missing. When Alex finally shared the news that he would be a father with his family, it was a moment of joy, reunion, and new beginnings. The family was thrilled to have their son back and eager to meet the new member. On the way, it was a moment of celebration and unity, where the uncertainties of the past gave way to a future full of hope and love. Alex and Julia welcomed their son with joy and love. Alex was able to resume his old job, and Julia continued her career in healthcare. Julia's dream home, which had been completed with Alex's help, was now full and alive with love and life. The family was united and strong, facing life's challenges together and celebrating their accomplishments. The journey that began with an unexpected encounter in an alley had turned into a beautiful story of love, reunion, and new beginnings. The home, now full of life, was a reflection of this love and the couple's determination to build a bright future together.